Today in this video, we are going to talk about Baburao Bagul's very famous text, Dalit literature is but human. I am Dr. L.V. Padmarani Rao, Professor and Head, PG Department of English and Research Center, Yashwant Mahavidyalaya Nanded, welcoming all of you to this deliberation. Baburao Ramaji Bagul was born on 17th July 1930 at Vishitgaon, Nanded district, Maharashtra. He was a writer and a poet, and his important works are Jevha Mi Jaat Chorli Hoti, When I Had Concealed My Caste, published in 1963. Maran Swastha Hot Ahe, Death is Getting Cheaper, published in 1969, and Ambedkar Bharat, Ambedkar India, published in 1981. He died on 26th March 2008 at Nashik, Maharashtra, at the age of 77. Baburao Ramaji Bagal was born in Nashik on 17th July 1930. After high school education, he did various manual jobs until 1968. While doing so, he published several short stories in magazines, which started getting attention from Marathi readers. Eventually, in 1963, came with his first collection of short stories, Jevha Mi Jaat Chorli Ahe, When I Had Concealed My Caste. It created a stir in Marathi literature with its passionate depiction of a crude society and thus brought in a new momentum to modern Marathi literature. Today, this text is seen by many critics as the epic of the downtrodden and was later made into a film by actor-director Vinay Apte. He followed it up with a collection of poems, which is titled as Akar, meaning shape, published in 1967, which gave immediate visibility to him. But it was his second collection of short stories, Maran Swastha Hota Hai, Death is Getting Cheaper, published in 1969, which cemented his position as an important enlightened voice of his generation. The collection is now considered an important landmark in Dalit writing in India, and in 1970 he was awarded the Harinarayan Apte Award by the government of Maharashtra. Bagal was an Ambedkarite Buddhist. After 1968, he became a full-time writer of literature, which continued to deal with the lives of the marginalized, downtrodden people in Maharashtra. His fictional writing gave graphic accounts of the lives of that class of people. The thoughts of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Jyotiba Phule, and Karl Marx had an influence on Bagal's mind. He soon became an important radical thinker of the Dalit movement and published a major ideologue of the Panther, Manifesto of the Panther, in 1972. In the same year, he presided over the Modern Literary Conference held at Mahad. Over the years, his stories taught future Dalit writers to give creative rendition to their autobiographical narratives. He died on 26th March 2008 at Nashik and was survived by his wife, 2 sons and daughters. Subsequently, the Yashwantrao Chavan Maharashtra Open University instituted the Baburao Bagal Gaurav Puraskar Award in recognition of his contributions to Marathi literature, to be given annually to the debut work of a budding short story writer. If we look at the literature of Baburao Bagal, Jevha Mi Jaat Chorli Hoti, 1963 onwards, he has published a number of write-ups like Maran Swastha Hota Hai in 1969, Sood 1970, Dalit Sahitya Acha Kranit Vignan, Ambedkar Bharat 1981, Aghori in 1983, Pashan in 1972, Kondi in 2002, Pavsha in 1971, along with which he has collected a number of poetry collections with Dalit Sahitya Acha Kranti Vidyan. He also had seen a number of translations. Death is Getting Cheaper, Another India, an anthology of contemporary Indian fiction and poetry, was edited by Nissim Ezekiel Meenakshi Mukherjee in 1990. Mother Indian Short Stories 1900 to 2000 by E.V. Ramakrishnan was published by Sahitya Academy in 2005. When I Hid My Caste and Other Stories are translated by Jero Pinto for Speaking Tiger in 2018. When we look at this text of Dalit literature is but human literature by Baburao Bagul, this has got a number of chapters, right from origins of suffering, a comprehensive vision, the nature of the exploitative state, property rights, varna and caste, divine origin, warlike characters, Christ, Sanskrit literature, literature of the saints, advent of the British and of the science, who is a Shudra, had there been Buddhism, national enlightenment, it ends with Dalit literature. It's a beautiful historiography that he tries to talk about right from the beginning of the Hindu literature till the Dalit literature. Let's look into each of these chapters with a little detail. The very first chapter is called as the Origins of Suffering. Property rights of human society are being talked about. He tries to bring in the concept of rich and poor, the exploitative power and slavery in the Indian society right from the beginning, sorrow, misery, and poverty from the point of view of the Dalits, the meaningless religious rituals that have been executed in the Indian society, the notions of heaven and hell are been very well discussed by Baburao Bagal in the very first chapter. The entire Indian culture and Indian society are totally governed by the exploitative state, argues Baburao Bagal. The second chapter, which is titled as a comprehensive vision, talks about the decline of the republican state and the idea of socialization of wealth and power that has totally failed in the Indian society. As a result, the number of serfs increased and it has converted the complete republican state into an autocratic state, where more money and more power strengthened around the upper class, and they had developed a sort of exploitative state over the poor, and the poor became poorer and poorer and has suffered a lot in the hands of the upper class. The third chapter, titled as The Nature of the Exploitative State, talks about the allowance only those doctrines and institutions to survive and prosper which help its exploitative nature to proliferate. Constructive principles and opinions of the opposite to the state are completely suppressed in the Indian society. So, inequality and untouchability should be there to help this exploitation, and anti spiritual and atheism are totally suppressed in order to increase their suppressed society and the exploitation of the poor and the Dalits. The next chapter, titled Property Rights, Varna and Caste System, introduces the Varna and caste, which are completely on the basis of birth. Because the ruling class wanted the position of wealth, power, higher social status in the society, and because the ruling class never wanted sorrow, suffering, misery, and servitude to themselves. The support is from the God and religion, obviously, which cannot be opposed in the Indian society. So, society is divided into rich, which is happy, and poor, which is always suffering. And this has very beautifully been given the name of caste and varna. And as a result, the exploitation continued. The chapter titled Divine Origin talks about God, the abstract and the invisible. In fact, it is the rich who have created all as God's will. The sinful and meritorious deeds of them, fatalism, birth and rebirth, destiny, moksha by individual efforts are all created by the rich. As everything is originated from the human body, it should be annihilated, so no social consciousness. And they employed military, police, and all the other kingly power, and they have given only one route to those who have opposed the jail. And the scriptures are in support with this domination. So the rich were happy and happier. But all injustices, atrocities, sorrow, and misery was owned by the poor class. The Holy Scriptures have sanctified those who fought wars for power. In war-like characters, this chapter, Baburao Bagal talks about who are gods. Hindu festivals are the celebration of power and such wars. The dead in the war became demons, and the ones who won the war became gods. Ramayanam, if you observe, Rama disgraced Sita by abandoning her to the forest. But just because Rama killed Ravana, he became the god and Ravana became the devil, argues Baburao Bagal. Even in Mahabharatam, Arjuna burnt the Khandava Vanam, but still is evolved as a hero and victorious. Temples are built for them. Their heroism is celebrated in spite of their brutality. Power and rule remained entirely in the hands of the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, the first two upper castes in Indian society. Mythology and culture were determined by this upper caste. Contempt, malice, pride of these two classes, Brahmins and Kshatriyas, have been celebrated throughout in the Indian culture and Indian mythology. Love, compassion, fraternity, and equality in the Indian society was completely marginalized, argues Baburao Bagal. In the chapter titled Christ, Different Ideals, Jesus Christ is been presented as a wonderful God who has brought about equality in the Western world. He says, Jesus Christ propounded the existence and God and his heavenly kingdom. Jesus is the dearest Son of God. Original sin of Adam and Eve have been presented, as a result of which they were driven from the paradise to earth. And they have presented man-woman relationship is sinful. If you follow Jesus, Baburao Bagal says, love, compassion, service, fraternity, equality, service, sacrifice, tolerance, and prayer, along with God's love, is been highlighted. In spite of rich and poor, these values are very important, and hence Christianity survived in the entire world, says Baburao Bagal. But Hinduism, with its caste system and Varna system, treated the Shudras, the weak, as the enemies and indulged in the propaganda against them. They always tried to suppress their voice and dominate them. Liberty, equality, fraternity, rationality, democracy, and socialism have no place in Hindu soil, argues Baburao Bagal. Racism, fascism, and perversion occupy a large domain in Hinduism, and hence Baburao Bagal criticizes the Hindu society to the core for having the inequalities. He also tries to talk about the Sanskrit literature. The heroes of the religious literature was all in Sanskrit. The war heroes became God, as he said, and their stories are in Sanskrit. Literature had the praise of kings, emperors, and upper varnas, only of Brahmins and Kshatriyas. Wealth, power, and education was monopolized by the Brahmins and was extended to Kshatriyas. No other varnas appear in Sanskrit literature and read the Sanskrit literature. Dalit literature or Dalit people are never seen in any of the texts of the Sanskrit literature, and hence Baburao Bagal criticizes them. In the title, in the chapter titled Literature of the Saints, literature of the saints appeared during the Islamic invasion. The main intention for the literature of the saints was to prop up the crumbling Hindu state, number one, and to curb the proliferation of Islam. So, the Santa literature or the Santa Sahitya could spread the ideology underlying the Varna system. The Bhakti movement could not bring equality in the society. Be as God made thee, is what they believed. During the age of decline of the Hindu saints and the rise of Muslim saints, the other sections of the Indian society slowly emerged. Who are the other sections of the Indian society? The Shudras, the Ati Shudras, and also the women. The Muslim rulers retained the Hindu social structure as it was suited for the oppressive purposes, and hence even they did not change it much. It is only because of the advent of the British that science, rationalistic thinking, and positive attitude towards all these classes of the society has emerged into India, says Baburao Bagal. The British defeated the Hindus as well as the Muslims, and with them came new knowledge and science, new machines and technology, new occupation and businesses. The transformation of social system of production began in India with the advent of British. New intellectual systems started taking roots in India. Western enlightenment induced the self-critical thinking not only in the West but also in the East, in India, through the advent of the British in the Indian soil. Then literature started expressing social themes and not mythological and philosophical and transcendental and religious. The elite Varnas now became poets, writers, leaders of the political movement, and they began to discuss their own problems publicly. They were forced to examine their own problems and also critically analyze them. This critical examination demanded a sort of reform and progress, and slowly the Indian soil and society started changing. With respect to women, Baburao Bagal says women became the subject of literature after centuries. A child widow, a child bride, a married girl at the mercy of in laws, joint Hindu family system, patriarchal domination were never discussed in the Indian soil and Indian literature. New science and technology, new forms of occupation and business, new literary and intellectual ideas emboldened the writers to portray the life of women also in the literature. Now he asks a question, who is Shudra, in his next chapter. Similarly, Baburao Bagal argues Shudras and Ati Shudras who were neglected so far as these long time also were being portrayed along with women after the advent of British. The mighty British Empire was promoting liberalism unlike the Peshwas. Not only the state, but the social movements also supported it. The Brahmins acquired new professions and new officers, and so they were all divided among themselves. English novels portrayed the lives of the weakest and the poorest, similar to women, Shudras, and Ati Shudras who came out into literature for the first time. And hence, Baburao Bagal says English writers are able to perceive the weak and the poor because Jesus Christ has perceived them. Christ gave the ideals of love, compassion, equality, and togetherness. Hindu writers could not perceive this because the Shudras and the Ati Shudras were opposite to Hindu heroes. And Hindu heroes had been accorded godhood. And the sacred books were of divine origin and propagated caste and varna system. So the Hindu writers neglected the Shudras and Ati Shudras along with women. It is only after the advent of the British, the English writers, under the Enlightenment philosophy of Jesus Christ, have tried to bring in all these characters into literature. Love and compassion could have been acquired significance had there been Buddhism in India right from the beginning, says Baburao Bagal. If Buddhism were there in India dominating, humanistic ideals would have been in place. Anti spiritualism, atheism, rationalism, and a progressive attitude would have taken place had Buddha been there on the land. The social structure would not be so rigid and exploitative, argues Baburao Bagal. Buddhism has made immense contribution to the fields of Indian medicine, chemistry, grammar, law, philosophy, and arts, says the all-praising version of Buddhism by Baburao Bagal. Now the new leaders started evolving under the light of Buddhism. Modern literature, in the intimation of British literature, had the essence of equality, democracy, and socialism. It opposed the notions of good and bad deeds, sin and pious actions, karma, birth and rebirth, and sacredness, which was once upon a time dominant in the Hindu literature. It also opposed untouchability and atrocities against all the so-called backward classes like Shudras and Atishudras. We have the writings of Mahatma Jyotirao Phule and Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, both evolving as the leaders, supporting supporting the Shudras and Atishudras and saying a big no to the domination of the upper castes in the Indian soil. The Shudras and Atishudras challenged the Hindu Varna system, number one, the religious domination of the Brahmins, number two, The political domination of the Kshatriyas, number 3. All atrocities that was done against them in terms of social, domestic, and political were condemned. The movements were both political as well as social. Phule, Agarkar, Gokhale, Ranade, who talked about misery and servitude of Shudras and Atishudras and the Varna system, were declared as enemies of the society and they were attacked from the so called upper classes from all sides. Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar fought at social level of abolishing inequality in India and at political level to drive the British out of India. The Phule Ambedkar principles reject caste, varna, religion, and all economic and social systems and advocates absolute democracy and equality. They propagated democratic socialism in India, and therefore they brought about the emergence of Dalit literature, which is the new voice in literature coming up in the modern age. And hence, in the chapter titled Modern India, Baburao Bagul says, after freedom, the constitution has been adopted and untouchability had been abolished. But nevertheless, in the society, Hinduism and untouchability still exist. Bhim Smriti and Manusmriti coexist. Caste and Varna do exist. Capitalism and democracy coexist. And religious differences definitely exist, in spite of the fact that the constitution has given equal status to all. Baburao Bagal says, democratic capitalism in India is the biggest problem increasing the social inequality. And hence, Dalit literature in this chapter, Baburao Bagal talks about the social movements by themselves cannot solve the problem of untouchability. So, Dalit literature, by discussing the social perceptions, also should discuss the problems like express its own background, position, place, and social perceptions. It should also talk about the nature of economics and politics of India and the nature of authority. Dalit literature should discuss the problems and philosophical issues underlying them because they are directly pertinent to the life of the Dalits. Dalit life is to be discussed in Dalit literature. The reasons for it since ages is to be discussed in detail. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, the embodiment of Dalit self-esteem, gave a deep thought about all these questions. Buddhism, with its anti-spiritualism and atheism, has a dynamic humanistic perspective, and Dalit literature is opposed to the establishment. And so, Baburao Bagal says Dalit literature should be leftist and is thus capable of shaping the future of India. Both Hinduism and Islam believe in the existence of God, religious rituals, worship and prayer, heaven and hell, soul and supreme soul, sin and pious actions leading to heaven and hell. And so both share the same psychic orientation, says Baburao Bagal. Hinduism is not based on democracy and socialism, and that is the biggest criticism of Baburao Bagal against Hinduism. It has the inclusion of fascism, hero worship, pride, scorn, malice, and hatred. And hence, in this context, Dalit literature should make the common man its hero and advocate socialism. In conclusion, Baburao Bagal says a human being is not inherently Dalit, but has been a neglected and untouchable. It is the system that degrades him in this fashion. When the system is changed, the human beings regain his human essence. Therefore, Baburao Bagal says literature that portrays the human being is not Dalit literature at all. Dalit accepted Dalithood, the way Buddha accepted suffering, and now started expressing through their literature. So, it is the reflection of India for eradicating suffering, number one, untouchability, number two, and the caste distinction, number three. Dalit literature is that is helpful for eradicating the suffering, eradicating the untouchability, and removing caste distinction in the Indian society. So, the literature of India is established as Hindu literature, but it is actually Dalit literature, Baburao Bagal says, which has the revolutionary power to accept new science and technology and bring about a total total transformation. Dalit is named for total revolution. It is revolution incarnate. And hence, Dalit literature is the new way of presenting Indian society to the entire world. Thank you very much for being a part of this video. Hope you have understood the ideology of Baburao Bagul in the modern context of Indian poetics. That's all from me today. See you in the next video. Bye for now. Namaskaram.